All right, I'm here with John Phillips with Primeaux,
Yeah, man.
handmade knife maker.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about some of the jobs you had before getting into
man.
knife making.
Before I got into knife making, I pretty much did like every job possible involving my hands. So when I was in college, I was studying sculpture, and I started working in a furniture shop. So this was making real high-end modern furniture, and they found out that I could weld. So I became the metal guy at the wood shop, and that was pretty cool for a while. And then as that company started to scale, my job started turning into production engineering, essentially, where I had to figure out how to get the things from one part of the process to the next and keep everything organized and moving. And so that involved like a lot of building a lot of machinery and a lot of gadgets in order to like take very heavy piles of, say, cabinet parts or table parts and move them from one station to the next. And as they go through every station, a new process is changing them. So the process of moving them had to change as well.
Did you get into music gear, guitars, things like that?
Oh,
right?
yeah. So that was years beyond.
Oh, okay.
So after I worked the furniture shop, then I went to another wood shop that was like totally old school, and we used like chisels and like hand planes and did like classic woodworking. Did that for a while. Then I started working at a stone shop doing stoneworking, where we were carving, chiseling marble and making like marble sculptures and granite countertops and architectural details. Then the stoneworking led me into starting a concrete company where I did architectural concrete and polished concrete. So we were like polishing floors and building sculptural countertops and fireplace surrounds and all that stuff. Very, very modern stuff. And then the economy crashed, and I rode my motorcycle around the country for a while and came back, and then I got into music because that was kind of my root passion for my whole life.
So what do you play? You're a musician?
I wouldn't call myself a musician, but,
Okay.
but I dabble.
Yeah.
And I just love music. I love to listen to it. I'm constantly just like digesting music from around the world all the time. And so, music's like always in the background of everything I do. So I get back from this like epic motorcycle journey. I didn't really know what to do with myself. And a friend of mine at that time was opening a music shop. And so he needed somebody to just help him run things. And so I started working in the music shop, and then next thing you know, he's teaching me how to repair stuff. And so then I got into like musical instrument restoration and repair, luthier work is what they call it.
Yeah, right, luthier.
So we're right here in East Tennessee, so I did a lot of work on banjos, old Martin, like bluegrass guitars, fiddles.
And this is at Morlock Music.
Yeah, it's at Morlock Music downtown.
Downtown Knoxville, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I was there for a few years, and then while I was working there, I became really good friends with a band from New York, and I started touring around with them and living out of a van, playing at, clubs and stuff.
What instrument do you play?
Mostly bass, but I'll dabble with guitar or a little bit of
What was that
banjo.
band?
It's called Spirit Family Reunion.
Okay.
And anyway, we did that for a few years, and then I decided that I needed to get back into doing my own thing.
Yeah. You missed working with your hands.
I missed working with my hands, and I missed being kind of in control of my own situation.
Sure, yeah.
When you're with a band, everything's very democratic, and you're working with people in tight quarters and living with them in tight quarters.
Oh yeah,
and
I know.
So,
yeah, you have to kind of lean on everybody else, and it's less control for you personally.
Yeah. So being a creator, like I felt like I really need to get back to my roots and get back into making stuff, and so I started working back with some different fabrication shops. So I was again back into making things, but for other people. But at least I was making stuff, mostly doing metal work at this time. And at a certain point, I realized, like, it'd be cool to have a nice knife. And I was like, I've done woodwork, I've done metal work, I've done all the things, so, like, how hard could this thing be? And so I start hammering on some metal at work, and
just casually hammering away.
Yeah, casually.
Yeah.
And realize that I don't know the first thing about metallurgy. I don't know the first thing about like what makes a knife. And so I start doing some research and discover that, you know, I'd been working with metal for years, and I never really understood like at a molecular level what was going on. So like every piece of metal is different. You know, it's just like a sandwich where, you know, it could be a turkey sandwich with cheddar cheese and mayo, or it could be a tuna sandwich on rye. And they're two, you know, they're both sandwiches, but they're two drastically different things with totally different ingredients and, you know, totally different end result.
So you could have two knives that almost look identical, but they're made of different components.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, or you could have a thing that's not even a real knife, but it looks like a knife. It's metal like a knife, but yet it doesn't have any of the molecular components needed to hold an edge to actually be sharpened.
Right.
Or to actually return to its original shape when you bend it. So all of a sudden I was like, holy shit, there's a lot that I don't know, and I need to figure it out. So I kind of just went all in and wanted to figure out everything I could about what makes a knife. And so that's when I started thinking like, man, there's more knives made than anything ever. Like knives were mankind's first tool. You know, we had to make a cutting device in order to farm, in order to hunt, in order to do anything, really. And so within that, I was like, man, this is like it's in our human nature to figure out. And so I went really deep into all this stuff. And
so it's a history lesson as well when you get into learning about all that.
Yeah, so that's really the thing that like made me connect with the craft, because there's so many different elements. Like I had all these different skill sets and all these different interests, and like I never really connected with one thing fully. But then when I discovered knife making, I was able to learn about history, I was able to learn about science, chemistry, ergonomics, physics. Like there's so many different aspects to it. So it just like encompassed me basically, and you know, I went all in on it.
Well, then also the title Bladesmith is just like the coolest job title of all time.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Bladesmith.
Yeah.
Okay, before we get into more specifics, we're going to take a quick tour of the shop.
Sounds good.
Yeah, sweet. Real quick, just run through a few of the jobs that you had before you got into knife making.
Okay. How quickly?
I mean,
so a few of the jobs that I had before I got into knife making were things like woodworking, concrete work, stone work, luthier work, tour manager, sound guy, and then blacksmith. And then eventually all those things converged into bladesmithing.
Yeah. And now you're 10 years in, right?
Yeah, I'm about 10
roughly.
years in.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about the process. I'm really interested in the beginning stage of just getting started with that. You know, it seems like just taking a tour through the shop, there's so much that goes into one piece.
Yeah.
What was your mindset like when you were beginning?
I mean, when I was beginning, it was purely for enjoyment. Like I was purely trying to just satisfy my own curiosities. And I really didn't know what I was doing. And while I worked at a metal shop, you know, I wanted to create the things at home in my garage. And so, you know, I had to figure out like, how do I build a forge? So my first forge I built was a coffee can sized forge that ran off of like a bottle of propane that a plumber would use. You know, just like a very, very rudimentary thing. Before I had grinders, first I was trying to use a grinding stone or an angle grinder to grind the knives. And so the finishes were really rough. I really didn't know about the history of knives. And so I was just like hammering out pieces of metal and they would bend a certain way and I would just be like, oh, that looks like a cool knife. And so they were more like artistic and they're more expressive, less functional, but very interesting pieces.
But you had to start somewhere. You had to
Yeah.
start practicing on something.
Yeah, no, totally. And I just had to like get that creative part out of me before I could like really start to dive into like the deeper things like the chemistry and the physics and all that stuff.
So then years later, moving from your shop at home to a dedicated space, how did that change your process at that point?
So, moving from a space like at home in my garage, I had no overhead to consider. I didn't have a large rent to pay for. My tools and machinery were all cobbled together, homemade stuff that I didn't have a lot of money invested in. So like really I had nothing to lose, essentially. Like I could just I could make 5 knives that all suck, and it was like whatever, it didn't matter. And once I got to a point where I needed to move out of my garage, because basically it was just becoming unsafe. And I had too many orders to fill, and I was not able to produce in my garage because there just wasn't the space, because you had to like tear one station down and set another station up just to like move processes. So once I moved into a commercial space, all of a sudden now I have a lot of bills to pay, really high rent, high insurance, business taxes all of a sudden that, you can kind of find ways around when you're working as a solo person.
But at that point, did you have what was your wait time for customers at that point?
At that point, probably like 4 years.
Wow.
Like this piece here I started in my garage, and I'm like 4 years ago. Yeah.
And
So it was like 4
what
to
are you
5
at
years.
now?
Now I think I've got down to about a year.
Okay.
But I've also stopped taking orders. So I've got, my backlog is down to about a year.
That's a good problem to have.
It's still a problem.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like a good problem to have, but like, it's just like any other job where you still got to get the work done in order to get the paycheck, and
So are you're at a process where at some point you'll just open it back up and you can have more orders coming in?
Honestly, what I'm trying to do right now is get more into making pieces for fun. And so I'm probably actually just going to start making more pieces for fun and offering them up on my newsletter sales, or creating pieces of content around them. So I have some ideas for pieces I want to make, very fancy pieces that I don't want to make selling the piece the end goal. I want to highlight the process. And so like I have a knife that I want to do it made out of meteorite. And I'm going to do a meteorite chef's knife, but we're probably going to like create some content around that.
How did you get your hands on that?
At a gem and mineral show.
Oh, neat. Okay.
I can show it to you. So I had some people that reached out to me and they wanted a meteorite wedding ring. And so in order to do that, I need to find some meteorite. So I went to our local gem and mineral show, and I met a guy who's a specific meteorite dealer. And so he works with people from all over the world that specialize in going out and finding this stuff. So this meteorite is the Minualesta meteorite. And this is one of the oldest things on planet Earth.
Yeah.
Like it's over 1 million years older than our planet, which is just insane. And so this is one, you can see I cut a ring core out of it.
Can I see it?
Yeah. And actually this ring is made from that material.
So I didn't even think to ask you, man. You also make rings as well as, what other products do you make other than knives?
I wouldn't call my rings a product I make, but I do some jewelry.
Okay.
I make necklaces and
Yeah.
earrings and rings and really anything. So it's all kind of the same to me.
Gotcha. So it sounds like you're stepping into another phase in your career where you want to be focusing on making products that you're really excited to work on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always excited about working on stuff, but like I feel as though I always have to be growing and evolving, and I don't ever want to stop growing and evolving. And so it's just what I have to do in order to like stay in it.
Yeah. I mean, stunning pieces of art is what you make, man.
Thanks.
Um,
I've always had a complex relationship with art because I studied fine art and art history in school, but I always felt the need for the art that I create personally to be functional in some way. And so, art doesn't have to be functional. Most art isn't functional, but that was kind of my challenge to myself that I've always gone after. So, I try to incorporate that in everything. So whether I'm building instruments, I've made a lot of instruments from scratch. Made like cigar box ukuleles, I've built banjos, built guitars, basses. I have an upright bass that I built. And it's functional all the way through.
Oh, here's the rain.
Yeah.
Oh, that's all right. Okay, this is a bit of a fun question for you.
Mm-hmm.
How many of the knives in your home are knives that you made yourself?
Most of the knives are knives I've made myself. I would say I have a few knives from other friends, other knife maker friends, or knives that I've acquired that are like antiques that I've restored.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say that like 99% are ours.
What about buried in like the depths of a drawer? Do you have a knife from Target or something like that?
No, actually I don't. It took me a while to purge
Yeah.
all the crappy ones, but at this point I just have crappy ones that I made.
the OGs.
Yeah, I have some really old ones that I'm
Yeah.
like, man, I'm glad that I didn't try to sell that to somebody.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But also they're cool pieces that, while they're like a little embarrassing, they're also like testaments to my process. And, I see them and use them every day. And I see like some of my oldest knives hanging next to some of my newest knives. And it's really affirming to see like how far you can go if you just stay at it.
I feel like that is, if I'm guessing correctly, that is probably a mentality that you had from the get-go, which is, we're just practicing to get started. We're going to keep going and keep going and keep going, even if you hit a wall at some point where you feel like, man, I'm really struggling to improve. I mean, tell me a little bit about that mindset, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I hit walls all the time,
Yeah.
honestly. And I actually just got over this piece that I've been working on for like a year. And like, there's so many things that I just wasn't happy with, and I had to redo and had to go over and, and I just had to stare at this piece until I figured out a solution for it. And there's a book called Zen Mind, Beginner Mind that I read many, many years ago that kind of talks about that idea that like you should always have this beginner's mindset in everything you do. You should always approach things with curiosity and with naivety and with an open mind, because if you decide from the beginning that this is really hard, like, why are you going to do it? There's no point. But if you approach something with like a certain childlike mentality or a naivety, you're able to approach it and you're not worried about how hard it's going to be. You just want to have the experience. And so that I try to carry that through everything I do.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think you said something in an interview I read, you hold the reins to your own growth.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, like everybody, like nobody's going to help you out with anything. I mean, people will help you out, but like at the end of the day, like you're the one who has to make the decisions about your life and about the direction that's going to take. And I think that too often it's really easy to be like, to find reasons why you can't do something or shouldn't do something or talk yourself out of something. But ultimately, like, it's yours to like do whatever you want with, and why not make it awesome,
Yeah. Is there any sort of advice you'd give to somebody that's interested in getting into craft work and working with their hands and building something special like this?
Yeah, I mean, find mentors. I think it's really important to find other people who are already doing something. It doesn't have to be like the end thing that you're trying to do, but like find people with some experience that can give you some guidance. That's a great place to start, and that way you get to see like what's a workshop supposed to be like, and how is a workflow supposed to work? You know, how are things supposed to move through the process? You know, you just pick up a lot of tips and like little tricks from just being around these environments. And so I think that's a good place to start. And also just knowing that like the path that you choose today doesn't have to be the path that you are on later. Like I had a million jobs before I figured out like this was the thing. And had I not had a million different jobs, I wouldn't be able to do all this different stuff. And so, you know, we're all on a path, and like that's what you have to remember is that, you know, it's just one step at a time down this path, and like it'll lead to awesome stuff if you just keep going.
Is it wild to think back when you first started forging? You first started you made your first knife, to think back where you were 10 years ago to now?
Oh yeah, like it's unbelievable. Like I would not believe you if you told me that like this is where I'd be.
Yeah.
And you know, and I remember going to my first knife show, and I went to my first knife show, and there was like people with, like the best stuff in the world, and I was just like, wow, like I will never be that good. And now I'm getting ready to pack up my stuff and go to that same show that I thought that I would never be good enough for. And now it's like, oh, actually, I am amongst the best. But it's only because, like, dedication, you know, and commitment.
Was there some early inspiration for you when you were developing your first builds, your first knives? Is there any sort of maybe mythical inspiration or like fictional inspiration, or is it mostly like actual knife makers?
It wasn't so much actual knife makers, but I was first really inspired by bushcrafting.
Okay.
Which is basically just kind of the idea of like living in the wild.
Yeah.
And I was really inspired by these guys that like wear buckskins all the time and like live in teepees and like, you know, dig clay from the riverbeds and like, you know, do everything like in these primitive kind of ways. And so, and you know, from that I was kind of connected to like the Old West and like, you know, guys going out to California to pan for gold or whatever. And, you know, they had to work with what they got and the things that were available to them. And so, like, most of my early inspirations were more rooted in history than they were fantasy. But related to history in that fantasy kind of realm, if that makes sense.
You blend the two together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I wasn't ever trying to make like the knife of Jim Bowie or whatever, you know, like of these like historical knife makers. I was more interested in these like fictionalized stories, kind of romancing the struggle.
I don't think we talked about foraging for materials to forge.
Oh yeah, yeah. So foraging materials to forge was like also one of my really early passions, where like I was almost more excited about like going into an old barn to find old sawmill blades or whatever, and you know, like uncovering these old stories, or you know, making these old stories up in my head, if nothing else.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, I've always loved antique stores and flea markets and thrift stores, and so, you know, when I first started off, I didn't have any money to work with nice materials, and nor did I didn't think I deserved the nice materials at that time, because I wasn't sure if I was going to ruin them or what. And so some of the first knives I made were from old files and rasps, or old plow blades, sawmill blades, you know, antique industrial stuff, essentially.
A lot of these pieces rusted out, found in old barns and
Yeah.
in the woods. And
Yeah, totally. And once I started making knives with these materials, people started contacting me out of the woodwork and just being like, oh, you know, my grandpa died and we're tearing down his barn. You want to come look and see if there's anything you can use? And so, you know, I'd go out to the middle of nowhere and dig through a barn and just like find all kinds of cool old stuff, old chains, blades, plows.
And it's not just the
whatever.
metal, but also the wood for the handles as well.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I would use wood for handles. I'd find like pieces of copper that I would then incorporate into the knife as like a spacer. Just all kinds of cool old stuff. I'd figure out how can I work that into the piece and like tell a story.
So I do have to ask you about Phish.
Oh yeah,
Not the animal or the food, but the band.
yeah,
I was digging around on your Instagram page and I saw the John Fishman knife,
yeah, yeah,
and then I walk in and see your flag here.
Yeah.
Man, that's awesome. I'm a big Phish fan as well.
yeah. No, I love Phish. I think that there's no better Phish than Phish.
Yeah.
I think Trey is an amazing guitar player. I think that Paige is an awesome keyboard player.
Oh, they're all awesome.
Fishman's
How
a great
long have you been
drummer.
seeing the band now?
Well, so I was into them when I was like 13, 14, like
Okay.
back in the early 90s. And then, you know, I first saw them in the early 2000s, and I wasn't a huge fan when I kind of came back to them.
Oh, okay.
And it took me a while to really go full in. So I don't know. I've probably been into them really for like 7 years, pretty hard.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but they've been a band that's been around since I was a kid. So
Sure. Yeah.
I have
You
mixed-
revisit it and then eventually kind of fell back in love with the band after
Yeah,
a long
yeah,
amount of time. Yeah.
yeah.
Really cool. Yeah. I was curious if you were gonna make a my friend knife at some point themed.
Yeah. So the donut knife is titled "My Friend, My Friend."
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a huge Dead fan as well.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up on them as well. So yeah, I love the jam scene.
Yeah. What's your favorite venue?
Favorite venue is probably Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
It's just so nice.
Yeah. The sound in there is.
Sounds great. It's a
Tops.
huge place, but it doesn't feel big.
Mm-hmm.
It's clean. Everybody there's nice. The staff is cool.
Do you have a favorite show, favorite jam, anything like that?
I mean, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
I
love
have a
asking
lot.
this question,
I have a
though.
lot of fun moments. You know, there's certain venues that I really like to go back to, even if they're not my favorite venues. You know, like Alpharetta. I'm not a huge fan of the venue, but I always see friends there, and it's like a cool time.
It's always amazing shows down there too.
I love Red Rocks, but you know, like I've been to bad shows at Red Rocks, and I've been to amazing shows at Red Rocks. But again, like live music is like such a cool thing, and that's what really like keeps me motivated, keeps me going. You know, I'll be spending hours and hours and hours at the grinder, and there's nothing better than putting on like 4 hours of Phish jams, you know, to just space out to.
Yeah, get lost in the work and get lost in the jams. That's really
Yeah.
cool. So I expect in the coming months some of your more passion pieces. Maybe you'll bring back a Phish piece into that fold.
Yeah, no, people have been asking for the Phish
Yeah.
pieces. I'm going to do some more Dead pieces. I'm a big King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard fan.
Oh, same. Yeah.
And so I want to do a Nonagon knife.
Nice.
here
Okay.
soon.
Cool.
Um,
So outside of your knife working, and the live music, going to catching shows, traveling around and seeing music that we both love. What else does John do?
Man, that's about it, really.
Yeah,
Like
okay.
I work like a lot, you know, 60 to 100 hours a week probably.
Okay, well then let me ask you this. I think maybe one of the reasons why you got into knife making is because of your love for cooking.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So cooking was definitely a passion. I love gardening.
Oh, cool.
I don't have a lot of time for gardening anymore, but you know, growing my own produce is really rewarding. Cooking, like I still cook every night, just about. And I love being experimental in the kitchen as well. So I'm always just trying like new tweaks and new things just to see what happens.
When was the last time you bought a bag of pre-cut produce?
Oh, I don't even know.
Yeah, it's a hard no.
Yeah, yeah.
Never.
Motorcycles have always been a big thing for me, although I haven't really had time to do much motorcycle stuff over the past few years as I've been trying to build this business. But back in the day, I was really into building Honda CB cafe racers, and then I moved on to Triumphs. And then I moved on to like motorcycle touring. So, traveling on my motorcycle thousands and thousands of miles. That was a lot of fun through my 20s and 30s.
Yeah. The TV show Forge and Fire, you won that competition?
Yep.
That was something that you applied for, or I guess auditioned for, many years before they actually called you to bring you on the show.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, it took like 2 or 3 years before, from the time they initially contacted me through Instagram, and they were looking for knife makers. And at that time, I wasn't ready to, I had never seen the show, first of all, I just heard about it. And second of all, like, my chops really weren't there, but I was willing to give it a shot. And so they contacted me, I said, yeah, I'll do it. Then there was a phone call, then I passed the first test, and then there was a Skype interview, which is like the second test, and then there was a background check, passed that, and then they said, all right, we'll call you. And so I wait, and like 9 months later, I've given up. And they contact me again, and I'm like, all right, sweet. And they're like, no, we want to do all that stuff again. And so I had to do another set of interviews, more Skype calls, more background checks. And then they're like, all right, we'll let you know. And like another year went by.
Oh, wow.
And so then I'd given up. And then they contacted me again. It was like right around Thanksgiving. It was actually between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And they were like, all right, you ready to go? And they're like, we're shooting 2 weeks. And,
Come on up to New York.
Yeah. And so I hadn't heard from them in like over 9 months, and I had given up all hope. And so, yeah, like right after Christmas in 2018, I went up there, shot the show, and then came back to my shop and finished shooting the show the first week of the year in 2019. And then they aired it in July. And yeah.
And you had to keep your mouth shut.
I had to keep my mouth shut the whole time.
So you knew you had won, but
yeah, so I couldn't say anything to anybody for basically like 3 years. I couldn't even talk about it.
That's wild. Yeah, I worked on this show called Moonshiner's Master Distiller, and it was a distilling competition show. So similar setup, I imagine, where you're given a challenge or a test, and then you have to work with the available materials to make it happen. Like you said, you built a sword.
Yeah.
Had you built a sword before the show?
No.
Right.
No, they were like, practice making swords. I was like, all right, I will. I didn't.
Yeah.
But, a sword is just a big knife, so how hard could it be?
Well, man, this has been really fun checking out the shop and seeing a lot of your amazing work. It's, I'm sure, really inspiring to a lot of people that are interested in building something with so much intention and design. It takes so much time to put in for one piece. There's so many creators out there that do this type of work, and it's awesome. It's amazing. So yeah, thanks for having me.
For sure, man.
Really
Thanks for
appreciate
coming.
it. Yeah, cool.